Hello there, Braden Smith here from Learn to Play the Fiddle. In this video I want to talk about playing one of the most important ornaments in Irish fiddle music. I'm talking here about the roll, and it's rolls that give Irish fiddle music its distinctive sound. If you're listening to Irish fiddle players and it sounds, really authentically Irish, it's probably partly the rolls that you're hearing. And so I want to teach you today how to play rolls in Irish fiddle music and to do them well, to do them properly. I'm actually going to be talking about, in this video, I'm just going to be talking about one kind of roll, but there are actually 4 or 5 different types of roll, depending on quite how you count them, and I'll be making videos about the other ones. But for now, I want to talk about what I'm going to call the long roll. We'll just call it a roll for short. And this is probably the most common and the most versatile of the rolls. So we'll look at how you play it, how you do it, and how you do it well, how you might practice it, and then we'll look at a couple of tunes that we could find places where we can put a roll in so that we can practice them, work out where we might put them and why, and so on. So we'll get into that in the second half of this video. So in this first part of the video, I want to just talk to you a bit about how I play rolls and also how I teach them to my students. So I'm going to talk you through 2 different ways of thinking about rolls, and we can try both of them and you can see what you find most useful. So before we start, I'm just going to play you a tune that we're going to look at later in the video. This is a jig by Paddy Fahey, called Paddy Fahey's Jig, as they all are, and we'll get into that later. But I just want you to be able to hear what a roll sounds like. So I'll play through the whole tune, and then we'll isolate a couple of moments where I'm playing using rolls or long rolls. So that's the tune we're going to look at in the second half of this video. For now, I just want to isolate the place in this, a couple of places in this tune where I play using long rolls. And for now, we're just going to look at the first half of the tune, the A part of this tune, and look at where I might put a roll in this tune. So I'll play you the whole A part through a bit slower. And there, towards the end of that A part, I'm playing a long roll on this first finger F sharp. So that's what we're going to look at later, how we might play that in this tune. But first of all, we're going to learn the technique of how to play a roll. And as I said, I'm going to suggest that there are 2 different ways of thinking about playing a roll. The first is you could think about a roll as having 5 notes. In this case, we're going to be playing a roll on a first finger F sharp on the E string. So that's our first note. Our second note would be the 3rd finger, the A, back to the first finger for the 3rd note, down to the open E string for the 4th note, and back to the first finger for the 5th note. Now that will sound like this if I play it a little bit faster. That's a little bit faster still, and that's faster still. So I'm still playing that F sharp, then all in one bow this will be the F sharp, then the 3rd finger A, back to the F sharp, E, and back to the F sharp. Now we'll talk about whether or not that's a helpful way of thinking about rolls in a second, but for now I just want to concentrate, we'll use this method for now, I want to concentrate on the rhythm. So it's called a long roll for maybe two reasons, partly because we tend to play it on longer notes, but also we want to hold this first note as a long note first of all. So we're going to hold that F sharp and then put all of the other notes at the end. And the other notes want to be really quick. In fact, once you get this fully up to speed, those other notes are going to almost be inaudible. So then they just become a kind of little burble at the end. And in fact, one thing that's quite important to realize about rolls, even if you learn them this way, is that rolls aren't really a melodic element in the tune. They're a much more rhythmic or percussive thing. So we can hear in this case the F sharp, which is our melody note, but then the roll itself is a kind of, it's like a series of hiccups at the end of the note, or a gurgle, or a sort of trill effect, but it's not really melodic, it's more rhythmic. So we sort of hear it as ba-dlum, and then that little rhythmic thing at the end is what's being created by the roll. So I'll just play that a couple more times so you can hear it slowly at first and then gradually faster. Like so. I'll just show you that up close so you can see exactly what I'm doing with my left hand. So again, slowly, the F sharp to start with, long note there. So the important thing to say here is see how small the movements are that I'm making with my left hand, trying to keep the fingers really close to the strings so that I can make those movements really quickly. If you get into a habit of making big movements with your fingers to bring them up and down off the strings like this, you'll never be able to make those movements quickly enough. You want to be able to keep your fingers really close to the strings, like so, in order to get that sound. So that's one way of thinking about how to play a roll. It's to think of it as the note that's in the melody, and then a note that's above it, and we'll talk about why the third finger in a second. Back to the note itself that's in the melody, the note below it, and back to the note itself. That's one way that we can think about a roll as being made up of 5 notes. The note above, back to the note below, and the note above. Now I want to suggest a slightly different way of thinking about how to play rolls. So the way that I've just been talking about thinking of a roll as made up of 5 notes is the way that I was taught to play rolls, and it's also the way that I started off teaching them. But I've since changed the way that I teach rolls slightly. And I think that this second way of thinking about them has its advantages, but I wanted to share both with you in case you find one easier than the other to work with. So the second way that we're going to think about playing rolls, rather than thinking of them as 5 notes, is we're going to think about 1 long note and 2 cuts. And if you don't know what a cut is, then I've made a video about how to play cuts and how we use them, and you can go and have a look at that. But if we think about this roll as being 1 long note with 2 cuts in it, it amounts to something very similar, but I hope that maybe this might be, if not easier, then it may produce a better sounding result. So now, rather than thinking about 5 notes, we're going to think about this same note. We're going to stick with that first finger F sharp on the E string, and we're going to play that long note. And then we're going to play a 3rd finger cut, just as you'll know how to do if you've already watched my other video on playing cuts. Playing that 3rd finger cut, and then as soon as we've played that 3rd finger cut, as soon as that's finished, we're going to play another cut. It's a different kind of cut. We're going to, just by a fraction of a centimetre, we're going to lift the first finger and put it back down. Lift and put it back down. In fact, we can start off at this point by saying you don't actually need to even take the finger off the string. As long as the string comes off the fingerboard, the note will disappear and then you can immediately put it back. So that's going to sound like this. I'll keep it separated for now, so 2 separate cuts. Like that. So that's the first cut. And here's the second cut. And you can practice it with that slight gap in between, and then gradually, as you get more used to doing that, you can shrink the gap between the 2 cuts. So as I say, it's possible that this actually amounts to the same thing, but the reason that I find that second approach possibly superior is it keeps you in mind of the fact that this isn't something melodic. You're not trying to create something that sounds like 5 nice melodic notes. You're trying to create something which sounds like 1 note with a kind of burble or a gurgle at the end, some sort of effect. And as I say, it's kind of more rhythmic than it is melodic. And thinking of it as 2 cuts might help you to achieve that sound. Now I said we'd talk about why the second note or the first cut in that sequence is using the 3rd finger, and I've also talked a bit about this when discussing cuts elsewhere. But basically, if you learn to play that roll with your 3rd finger when you're playing a 1st finger roll, so when your note is a 1st finger, could be an F sharp, could be a B, could be an E, could be an A, could also be an F natural, B flat, and so on and so on. If you learn to play that with the 3rd finger when you're playing a 1st finger note using the 3rd finger as the cut, then you can do the same thing when you're playing a 2nd finger. So for now, let's go up to the next note. So we'll go up to, just for argument, let's go up to a G sharp. Exactly the same thing now. We're going to keep the 1st finger down behind the 2nd finger as normal, as if we were coming up through a scale. And we're going to play a roll on that G sharp, and we're going to do exactly the same thing. So you can either think of this as 5 notes, G sharp, up to A, back to G sharp, down to F sharp, and back to G sharp. Or you can think of it as 2 cuts. 3rd finger cut, and then the 2nd finger up and down. So it doesn't make too much difference which way you think about it. I'll play you 2 versions thinking about it in slightly different ways. You can see whether you can hear any difference. So this is a roll composed of 5 notes. I'm trying to keep those notes really quick anyway, so hopefully it won't really make too much difference which way you think about it. But here is the roll composed of 2 cuts. And so on. So those are 2 different ways of thinking about rolls. We've touched first of all on how to play 1st finger rolls with the 3rd finger as either the cut that comes above or the note that comes above. And then exactly the same thing with the 2nd finger. Now you might be wondering why I suggested that you keep that 1st finger down behind the 2nd finger when you're playing a 2nd finger roll. Well, I don't have a definitive answer to that, but it seems to me that there are advantages in having that 1st finger down even when you're playing a 2nd finger roll, so that when the 2nd finger comes up and goes down, because that 1st finger is down, the string won't ring quite as much, and we don't really want that note to sound fully. So having that 1st finger down means that the open string, which is much faster to ring, create a note, doesn't immediately appear. You can definitely hear the difference between playing without that 1st finger down and playing with it down, I think anyway. But it's not a really big deal, but I would suggest that it's easier to learn to play those 2nd finger rolls with the 1st finger down behind the 2nd finger. So once you've got those different kinds of rolls, so we've done first finger rolls, second finger rolls, and you can also do third finger rolls. So now we're going to have the third finger down, second finger down behind it. You could also have the first finger down if you want, but it's up to you. That's not so important. So the third finger down, second finger down behind it, either in this case G natural position or in the G sharp position. That's up to you. It might depend what key you're in. We can talk about that another time. So the second and third finger down, in this case I'm going to keep with G sharp just because that's what we've already been playing, and we're going to go up to the A. So now we've got an A note and we're going to put a long roll on an A. So starting with the note, and now we're going to come up either to the note above or the cut above, and we're going to use the fourth finger exactly like we would as if we were playing a fourth finger cut. And it's exactly the same process. Cut above and then third finger up and down as quickly as you can. So again, just to slow that down through all three fingers, maybe again I'll show you close up what that looks like. So here's the first finger roll, slowly first of all. And speeding it back up. Here's the second finger, the same thing, starting slowly. And third finger, slowly start with. And there we are. Just quickly to reiterate that point about the timing, what you're looking to do here is hold that initial note for as long as you possibly can. It's kind of a little bit like a game of chicken. You want to leave all that, the roll, which feels like the kind of complicated bit, you want to leave that as late as possible in the note. In fact, it can be useful to think about the roll as happening not at the end of that note, but as immediately happening before the next note in the tune. I find that helpful sometimes to think of the roll almost as attached to the next note rather than as part of the previous note, because you want to leave it right to the end, holding the melody note for as long as you can, then you play the roll and straight on to another note. So I'll just give you that A part of this tune that we were talking about one more time, just so you can hear it and so you can hear it in context. Great. So that's hopefully taught you something about how to play long rolls, how to do the technique of playing long rolls. Just want to quickly suggest a way that you might practice playing long rolls. This is fairly straightforward. It might already have occurred to you, but an obvious way of doing this is to just play your scales with long rolls instead. I'm not going to do anything on the open strings. I'll make another video about playing crans on open strings, but we don't need to worry about that for now. But every note other than the open string, we're going to play a long roll. So we'll start on the D string, we'll play an open D for a long note, and then we'll play an E with a long roll, up to the F sharp with a long roll, and so on. And you can come back down. And gradually you can work up the speed. Until you get really confident being able to just drop those in anywhere where you've got a long note in a tune. We'll talk a bit more about where we might put these in tunes, but get really confident with the technique first of all. Get really used to playing them holding that note for as long as you can, playing the roll at the end until your fingers are really used to that technique. So I ended up making a separate video on Paddy Fahey's jig, including where to play rolls in that tune, and why we might put them in certain places. But this video is getting rather long, so I decided to leave it there for now, and you can find the other video on Paddy Fahey's jig, and I'll go into more detail about that tune and where to put these long rolls in that particular tune there. And in subsequent videos where I'm teaching you to play other tunes, I'll start talking about where I play long rolls, where you might want to put long rolls into your tunes. So that'll be an ornament that I'll start to refer to. Great, I hope you've got something out of that and feel like you're now on your way to be able to play long rolls in Irish fiddle music. If you found that useful, then please do subscribe to the channel, and hit the like button. It all helps with the YouTube algorithm. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks for watching.